This time on Poll Hub, Washington is fully engulfed in impeachment, even if the rest of the country may be less so for now. Whatever happens with the proceedings, there's likely to be some impact on members of Congress in 2020. We've got McClatchy Chief Congressional Correspondent David Lightman here to discuss. Plus, is there anything wrong with candidates urging their supporters to be included in polls? We'll attempt to answer that all of a sudden very relevant question. So let's get started. And hi, everybody. Welcome to Poll Hub. I'm J.D. Dapper, Director of Innovation here at the Marist Poll.
And I'm Barbara Carvalho, Director of the Marist Poll.
And I'm Lee Berengoff, Director of the Marist College Institute for Public Opinion.
It's been a very slow news, few years. Just not much happening, not much to discuss. Really boring. But finally, we've got something that's exciting, this impeachment thing that I've been hearing about. So I kid. Impeachment clearly has now come full fruition. We are in the midst of hearings and moving towards what looks to be a trial sometime in the early part of the new year in the Senate. Seems very likely. No better person to discuss this and the impact of this than McClatchy's Chief Congressional Correspondent, David Lightman, who has been on the show before. Thank you for joining us, David.
Hey, thanks for having me.
So, lay of the land. What does this mean? Let's start first. What does this mean for Congress, for instance?
Well, it illustrates just how divided this Congress is, and you might say, well, that's not news, but impeachment is an historic, serious matter. Look back to the Clinton impeachment in '98, and not every Republican was fully on board. In fact, there were votes against two of the articles. Look back to the 73-74 Nixon impeachment proceedings, and you'll see again, there was a lot of Republican angst, but this time, at least so far, it is pure party line. There may be a few Democrats who vote no, but boy, they're hard to find, and they ain't talking.
Are you hearing anything in private? You always see in the news, the Republicans in private are saying, they really have had it with Trump, but they're not going to vote or say anything publicly. Are you hearing anything in the corridors that gives any credence to that?
Oh, yeah, very much so. But we can't quote it. We can't identify anyone. Now, it's not a groundswell, but there are several Republicans, and I don't think any names would surprise you, or at least surprise political junkies, who say, it's very difficult to defend them, very difficult to defend not just policy, but the tweets, the attitude. As we sit here and tape this today, he's criticizing the 16-year-old who was Times Person of the Year for her work on climate change. People, Republicans, Democrats, they don't like that. But again, the Republicans are wary of speaking out publicly.
If the polls have been, and ours as well, sort of 50-50, reflecting the divisions that you're talking about in the country. If the polls were like 60-40 or 65-35, would we be getting a different reaction either way in Congress if the Republicans, were dominating, or the Democrats?
Oh, I think so. If you go back again to Nixon and Liam Barber, you better know this better than I. Go back to 73.
Whoa.
Because I'm just a kid.
Whoa,
right?
Yeah,
No, but you study this stuff.
Okay. That's what he meant.
That's bad.
That's what he meant.
I unfortunately remember every minute of it.
I know you
do.
But
as the Nixon drama unfolded, beginning roughly in the summer of 73 and continuing into the summer of 74, you had other things that brought the presidency down. You had lines at gasoline stations in many places. You had inflation starting to jump. You had tensions with the Soviet Union. And it all helped contribute to this atmosphere of, my goodness, something is out of control. You don't get that sense now. I've always said, without any evidence, but tell me what the economy looks like in October of 2020, and I'll tell you who's going to win the election. Well, right now, as you know, the economy's rolling along for most people, and as a result, Donald Trump's constituency is not going anywhere.
What about Speaker Pelosi? It wasn't many months ago where, people were really talking about whether she could hold together the different factions of the Democrats in Congress. Is she still having trouble doing that behind the scenes, or, is everybody kind of rallying against Trump, and that's kind of, they have the common enemy and they're moving forward?
It's a good question. Had you asked me this, several days ago, for example, I might have given you a different answer. But I got to say, the way the speaker has put this together in the month of December is almost masterful. First of all, there was a lot of talk, particularly by the more liberal wing, that they wanted articles of impeachment relating to the Mueller report, which dealt with the Russia situation. And somehow she managed to squelch that very quickly. She said, keep it simple. Let's not go off on a tangent. The other thing she did was, roughly an hour after she and other committee chairmen announced articles of impeachment, they did another announcement saying that they had agreed on a U.S., Canada, Mexico trade pact with the Trump administration. Pelosi's mantra has been, yes, we're doing impeachment, but we're doing lots of other things as well. And she's kept that going, and she knows she has to keep it going because there are 31 House Democrats who won in 2018 in districts that President Trump carried in 2016. And if even roughly 20 of those Democrats lose, then Republicans take the House if they're able to hold their seats.
Yeah, let me ask you about that, because we talk about this hard partisanship, and a lot of ink is spilled on why the Republicans won't break from Trump, which is he's got a 99.99%, well, I exaggerate, but a really amazing approval rating among Republicans. And Republicans have to win Republican primaries, if they're primaried, in order to get to a general. So their focus is on supporting Donald Trump for obvious reasons. But the flip side of that is these Democrats you're talking about, and I'm wondering about what you're picking up from the internal polling, the DNCs and the RNCs, polling and their work on the ground about what risk there really is to them, because the few public polls that have gotten out have been pretty poor quality. Some of them totally untrustworthy. But I know that these campaigns and the DNC, they got a lot of money to do good polling. Is there a real fear that there's a risk to these new Democrats, or these Democrats that are in Trump districts?
Oh, absolutely. In fact, it's hard to pin down publicly, but I can say it on this show. One of the fears is this: if impeachment plays out the way it appears to be now, in other words, the House votes impeachment December 18th or 19th, and then it goes to a Senate trial in January, and it's all over by February 1st, and the president is not removed from office, well, then the president can run around the country for the next 9 months saying, hey, as I told everybody, the system hates me, the elites hate me, but I beat them. I beat him again, just like I beat him in 2016. And the Democrats in these swing districts are worried that really has resonance, because the thinking is people in those swing districts and people in non-swing districts don't like Washington. They don't like the whole system here. And you're just giving the Republicans more ammunition to go out there and fight.
Is it in the interests of both the Democrats and the Republicans to sort of bring this to an end quickly? The Democrats wanting to get back to the presidential campaign. The Republicans want to sort of free up Donald Trump from what is obviously something that's annoying him, to say the least. It almost seems like both sides, if there's any unity, it's in they want to both end this. Is that an accurate perception?
That's right. I mean, as you know, Speaker Pelosi was never big on this to begin with. She saw the political danger for her party. And when she finally agreed to it, remember, it's because she thought the phone call to Ukraine, the allegation that the president basically traded the threat of aid for investigation of former Vice President Biden, she saw that as fairly simple to express, and so she went along with it. But she also sees the political peril, and I think her feeling is get this over with so they can talk about defense strategy and trade and prescription drug prices. Republicans, same thing. They want to get Trump out there. They want to talk about the quote-unquote liberal Democrats who are eager to tax and spend you to death.
And what about Mitch McConnell? Is he a winner or a loser in all of this. I don't necessarily mean in Kentucky, but in terms of his position and what's going to happen to the Senate come next November.
It's a good question. McConnell is a master at reading the times, if you will, mastering the situation. He's incredibly adaptable. He worked with President Obama and Joe Biden when he was vice president, and they crafted all kinds of budget deals that avoided all kinds of crises. And back when he became Republican leader in 07, 08, he was able to craft several deals to bail out the auto industry, the banking industry. Now, the last 3-4 years under Trump, he's gone all in as Trump's biggest advocate. It'll be interesting to see if he changes again with the times, if he sees his constituency in peril. Now, first, he has his own reelection, although that appears to be a situation where he's the favorite. But you also have several vulnerable Republicans, as you know, and it only takes a net loss of 3 or 4 seats, depending on who wins the presidency, for Democrats to regain control.
So right now, we're all in on impeachment. That's all anybody's talking about, at least in Washington. But I think we also have learned over the last, especially 3 years, that whatever is in today may be out tomorrow. So if this is wrapped by February, are we even, and maybe Donald Trump's talking about impeachment, but is anybody else talking about impeachment by the time we get to September, October, November?
That's a great question. I find it's interesting because McClatchy has markets in 30 different cities, most in the South and the West. And the stuff getting attention, impeachment does well, but I wrote a story 2 weeks ago about tax cuts and the impact of the 2017 tax cut now that the IRS figures are in. And we did versions for our different markets. And, oh my gosh, did that take off. It got tremendous readership. And I'll tell you another one that exploded. One of the House committees, the House Judiciary Committee, in fact, passed a bill to reform the marijuana laws, and it got some Republican support. Boom. I mean, that thing was better read than any impeachment story I've done.
Interesting. So you alluded earlier to my insightful historical knowledge of Watergate.
Oh, is that what that was?
That's what that was.
Allusion to your knowledge.
And my age. So during Watergate, we had some really, really outstanding moments like, why don't you check the tapes, and what did the president know and when did he know it, and these things that have become, iconic political phrases for forever and ever and ever. So far, I don't think we've turned one of those in these diatribes we're witnessing. Is there anything punching through?
Can you do me a favor?
Do me a favor, though. Maybe that's the closest one, but it doesn't seem like we've had that. I'm just a country lawyer from I always say country pollster from Poughkeepsie. That's a little bit of a paraphrase. But anything you got?
Well,
anything you pick up?
No, that's a good point, Lee. No, and it comes back to this. People say, what's going to move public opinion here on impeachment? And this is just my theory based on nothing scientific. Something surprising. Remember, Watergate was week after week of surprises. Different characters we never expected parading before us. Just all kinds of craziness. The Clinton impeachment was easy to understand because it was about sex, and it was lurid.
And don't forget the blue dress,
or the
exactly.
definition of what is. Those were good.
Yeah, that kind of stuff. But this, again, there's no surprises, and it's hard to understand for most people. I know they think the Ukraine phone call is easy, but I don't think it is. So far, there's no aha moment there.
Yeah, and also they, clearly putting Hunter Biden into it, it's sort of like clouds all the discussion. All right, well, okay, Dave. So are you heading up to New Hampshire for the primary? Each 4 years, we sort of have a nice dinner with you meeting with our students. I was wondering if we're going to get to do that again.
I hope so, but impeachment may have me handcuffed here.
All right.
I may have to witness history.
Yeah, well, okay.
We'll see.
We'll be up there with a whole bunch of students, and if you're around, we'd love to have you over and meet with the students, as you have done every 4 years for quite some time. In the meantime, thanks so much for joining the program, and happy hunting down the road.
Thanks. It's been a pleasure. I appreciate it.
So perhaps we talk a little bit about that other story that's going on, which is the 2020 campaign and the Democrats that are running around the country trying to get some attention, even though a lot of the political focus is on impeachment. And some of them, actually Tulsi Gabbard in particular, have been encouraging people to participate in online panels and telephone polls, telling their supporters, sign up, or if somebody calls, answer the questions so we can get a bump in the polls and get on that debate stage.
Yeah, because it's not without consequence, because this is sort of gaming the system where when the DNC sets criteria that you need 2%, 3%, now it's 4% to get into on several polls, and now there's an opportunity. Well, maybe we can game the system and make sure we get into some of these online polls because you can gain access to
candidates. I mean, if a candidate has 1 or 2% support among the Democratic electorate, can they actually impact the polls by doing this?
I don't know. I think the pollsters who do the panels would tell us that they're getting people from multiple sources and that they could detect a different refusal rate for different candidates, suggesting that maybe one of them is trying to flood the panel. But I don't know.
For instance, you can't go to YouGov.com and sign up because their panelists come from so many different places.
Yeah. And so,
is this a new thing, though?
Well, I mean, the online polls are not new, but they're fairly recent in terms of the ubiquity of them. I don't recall a candidate in the past, pushing supporters to sign up for things you couldn't sign up for. We can't sign up for one of our polls. I mean, that's one of the misnomers is people are always like, well, I'd like to be in your poll. Well, if we happen to call your number and you could be in it.
There you are.
And so there's really no way to game scientific polls like the ones we do. There would be no possible way to do that. You'd have to buy you buy 2 million phone numbers and you hope that you can't do that. But so I haven't heard of that before. But I think there was one argument within, and we subscribe. Obviously, all of us are in APOR, which is the association that of pollsters that looks at this stuff and discusses this kind of stuff. And there was a pretty fair analogy that if you were to try and do that with our type of polling, this scientific polling, you would have to buy hundreds of thousands or even millions of phone numbers to do the same thing. And the people who run the online panels say that there's no possible way to game it. Tulsi Gabbard doesn't have enough supporters, even if every one of them were to sign up, to actually be able to game their system by which they build these panels and then do these internet polls.
Way back in the day when online polls were just kind of coming of age, there was a pollster, Zogby, who did a lot of public polling, and you could go to his website and sign up for his panel. And he tried to encourage people to actually do that and said, well, if you do this, we'll put a question on our poll that your group might like. So it kind of encouraged groups to do this. And I think there was a group who wanted to legalize marijuana in New York State that did get their membership to go to his website to sign up. And lo and behold, he did do a survey to find out what New Yorkers thought about weed at that point in time. But I don't think online polls now recruit quite that way, and they recruit from so many sources. That's a tough thing to do.
And I think what this really points to is something we've talked a lot about, which is a misunderstanding of polling in general. That somehow these types of polls, whether they're internet polls or they're the scientific polls that we do, the telephone polls, are somehow no different than when you scroll past an ad in Facebook and it's either Donald Trump or Tulsi Gabbard or whoever saying, "Take my poll."
Yeah, well, I've seen that on.
Do you support me or not?
I'm seeing a lot of that.
Polls.
Take this poll question. Joe Biden website.
Right. And I think there's a lot of confusion that people think those are polls. And I mean, they are polls, but they're not remotely valid. They're no more valid than the Coke Pepsi challenge, in a supermarket. So I think that's a lot of this has to do with the confusion about what's a good poll, which is something that we've talked a lot about. And we also have put together an entire online, portal, the Marist Poll Academy, which we talk about in every episode, where that is easily explained to people, the difference between scrolling past something in Instagram and going, that's a poll, and Tulsi Gabbard urging her supporters to somehow be able to game the system.
And there you have it. And that's it for this week's edition of Poll Hub, a production of the Marist Poll at Marist College in Poughkeepsie, New York. We want to thank Mary Griffith, our executive producer, and Casey Schaff, our editor, who've been with us for quite some time now. Mary from the start, Casey.
This is episode 125, by the way.
125.
How cool. How cool. Casey, how many have you done? Thanks also to the Roper Center Archive at Cornell University for providing us the ability to look back at survey questions and results over the decades. That's how we're able to understand impeachment, past, present, and who knows, future, too. And if you have any questions or comments, please reach out to us on social media. We're at Marist Poll on Twitter and Marist Poll on Facebook and Instagram.
And if you'd like to subscribe, you should hit the subscribe button wherever you watch this. Also, if you could leave a review, that helps other people find us, other people getting their new, iPhones for Christmas, and they're looking for a podcast to listen to. Good reviews help people find
comes
other
with
good
a
podcasts.
subscription.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
A free subscription.
Well, it's always free. And finally, we mentioned the Academy before, academy.maristpoll.marist.edu. It's a great place to find out about all this stuff we're talking about, to discern between the good polls and the bad and the stuff that is polls and isn't. Easy to do. It's free, and we'd encourage you to take a look and see what you think. That's it for now. We will see you next time.